Hi, this is Shelby Morrison, music historian, resident rebel girl, and VP of Curatorial Operations at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You're listening to Into the Vault, a mini podcast within a podcast where I get to nerd out about an artifact inspired by Kathleen Hanna's conversation in the main podcast, Music Makes Us. The last episode of Music Makes Us featured an amazing conversation between our host, Kathleen Hanna, and viral sensation, Towa Bird, a singer, songwriter, and guitarist who dreams of becoming the lesbian Paul McCartney. So today we get to dive into an artifact from a band that is, year after year, the number one favorite of our audience. 1988 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees, one of the biggest bands of all time. Some might even say they're bigger than Jesus. You guessed it. Today we are talking about the band that changed the world forever, the Beatles.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you something. I think you'll understand.
That right there is the 1963 classic, I Want to Hold Your Hand. It's a song that is so important, not only because it's infectious, it's fun, it's yearning, it's infused with the torture of young love, but also because it is the very first Beatles song that hit number one in America. The track inspired everyone, from Bob Dylan to the Beach Boys, and opened the door to the Beatles' global superstardom. John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr kick-started the British invasion that swept the U.S. in the 1960s. Like Elvis Presley before them, the Beatles rewrote the rules of what performers could be and do, forever altering the pop and cultural landscape. Constantly evolving musically, the Beatles ushered in a modern era of rock, a time of experimentation, transformation, and broken taboos, all set to irresistible tunes.
Love, love me do. You know I love you.
Like many songs by the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand was written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. When remembering what those early writing sessions were like, John said, "We wrote a lot of stuff together, one-on-one, eyeball to eyeball. Like, in I Want to Hold Your Hand, I remember when we got the chord that made the song. We were in Jane Asher's house, downstairs in the cellar playing on the piano at the same time, and we had, oh, you got that something. And Paul hits this chord, and I turn to him and I say, that's it. I said, do that again." Their collaboration is clear in the recording, with both Lennon and McCartney on lead vocals, exploding with those Beatles harmonies that we all have come to know and love. 1963 was a pretty crazy year for the Fab Four. With the Lennon-McCartney writing partnership solidified, the band was headed to, in the words of John Lennon, the toppermost of the poppermost. On February 11th, 1963, at Abbey Road Studios, they recorded their first ever album, Please Please Me. They recorded 10 songs, all in one marathon of a day. And yes, this early in their career, they were already recording at the famed Abbey Road Studios. Just a month and a half later, on March 22nd, they released the album and watched it climb up the charts. By May, they had the number one album in the UK, the first of 15 total Beatles albums that hit number one on the UK charts, the most of any artist in history, a record that they still hold to this day. In those 2 months between releasing Please Please Me and the album hitting number one, another important thing happened. Paul McCartney met English actress Jane Asher, and they quickly started dating. Soon, Paul moved in with Jane at her parents' townhouse at 57 Wimpole Street in London, where the piano John's quote mentioned sat in the basement, just waiting for greatness. The Beatles' ties with the Asher family go way back, even if they didn't realize it in 1963. Margaret Asher, Jane's mother, was a professor of oboe at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. By some strange coincidence, during her tenure, she taught one student who had a lot of potential named George Martin. That is the same George Martin who grew up to become the producer, composer, arranger, and musician who produced nearly everything the Beatles made. His work was so extensive and impactful that he actually became known as the fifth Beatle, and he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1999. Even as far back as 1963, he was already working with the Fab Four. I Want to Hold Your Hand isn't the only familiar song that was written on the Asher family piano. Paul lived on Wimpole Street until 1966, and in that time frame, the band released A Hard Day's Night, Beatles for Sale, Help, and Rubber Soul. Talk about prolific. Can you imagine releasing 5 albums in just over 2 years? And going from the simple innocence of, I wanna hold your hand, to the psychedelic existential, he's a real nowhere man in the same period? It's wild. We Can Work It Out, and I Love Her, and Yesterday are just a few of the iconic songs written on the piano during the time period. As legend has it, Paul McCartney woke up at Wimpole Street with the full tune of Yesterday already in his head. He immediately went to the piano to play it so he wouldn't forget, but was worried it had come to him too easily and he had accidentally plagiarized another song. After weeks of trying to figure out what song it was, he finally was convinced that the melody was in fact an original, and he gave it a title, Scrambled Eggs. That wasn't what you were expecting me to say, was it? Yesterday is now the most covered song in the history of recorded music, with over 2,200 versions from artists of all genres and generations, including Marvin Gaye, Frank Sinatra, The Supremes, Willie Nelson, and Boyz II Men, just to name a few. It's crazy to think about how far one song can go, even if the first time it's played was just on a piano in somebody's basement. The Asher family piano, as well as many other artifacts from the Beatles, including handwritten lyrics, clothing, concert posters, and more, is now on display at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, Ohio. Come on by to see exhibits on the Beatles, Rolling Stones, Revolutionary Women, Saturday Night Live, and more. This has been Into the Vault with me, Shelby Morrison. This was produced by Morgan Flannery, Jocelyn Gonzalez, Yuri Lasordo, and Melanie Wiggins. Tune in next week for another revolutionary interview on Music Makes Us.